Remember, there's only room for one sovereign at a time, not two. So you can't be the same as the sovereign if you're the Prince of Wales or the heir.
King Charles just destroyed any hope of reconciliation between himself and Harry with what he just did. In the dead of night, he signed a document that shook the entire royal family to its core. He discarded Harry and elevated James, Earl of Wessex, to the title of Prince. Nothing prepared the palace staff for what Harry did next. It was beyond shocking. But the most devastating part of this whole story is the real reason why Charles did it. Because it has everything to do with a secret Harry had been hiding for years. And when Charles finally found out, there was no going back. The day Charles saw enough. Something went very wrong on the morning of April 14th, 2026. Charles stormed into his private study, and honestly, he looked like a man who had just watched something die in front of him. His face was ash gray. His jaw was locked so tight the muscle in his cheek was visibly jumping. The staff who moved to follow him got one look from his eyes and stopped dead in their tracks. That glare said, "Get out of my way," and "Stay out," and every single person in that corridor obeyed it instantly. The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was the kind that presses against your eardrums. Staff stood frozen in the hallway and exchanged nervous looks. Charles never used that study. Never. Which meant whatever was eating him alive right now was something he could not let anyone else see on his face while he processed it. They all knew what was playing on that television in the study room. They had all seen the news. Harry and Meghan had just landed in Melbourne, and something about what Charles was watching on that screen had just broken something open inside him that 5 years of patience had been holding shut. Now let me give you the picture of what that tour was supposed to look like. Harry's team had spent weeks building it up. The itinerary was packed. The press releases were polished. The message was loud and clear. Harry and Meghan did not need the royal family. They did not need the palace, the titles, the institution. They had something more powerful than all of that. They had the love of the people, and Australia, they believed, was going to prove it. Harry's team were convinced the Australian public would receive them like royalty, like Diana, like something the world had been waiting for. They were devastatingly wrong. The first venue was supposed to be filled. It was not. The images that leaked out showed wide open spaces where crowds should have been standing shoulder to shoulder. Harry's team scrambled to explain it away, but the cameras had already captured it. Then the second event told the same story. Then the third. The cameras had already swept across those venues and shown the world exactly how many people had actually shown up. And the answer was painfully, embarrassingly few. The Australian tabloids did not even waste their anger on Harry and Meghan. Anger would have meant they still mattered. Instead, the press did something far worse. They laughed hard. One Melbourne columnist wrote that the couple had flown halfway around the world, squeezed into their best outfits, stretched their smiles as wide as they would go, and walked straight into a country that could not have cared less if it tried. He said they got the same energy a country gives a minor celebrity nobody quite remembers the name of. Another paper ran a headline that just screamed one question in the biggest, boldest letters the front page could hold. Why are they here? And the most humiliating part was not the question. It was the silence that followed it. Because nobody, not one single person in that entire country, had a convincing answer. Then the protesters showed up and things got ugly fast. A group gathered outside one of the venues and they were not holding signs of support. One woman in the front row held a poster that read, "Go home, Harry," in thick red letters, and she was screaming it too. Not just holding it, actually screaming the words over and over with her face pulled into something raw and furious. A man beside her shouted that Harry had turned his back on his country and his family, and now he wanted applause for it. Another protester yelled that Meghan had destroyed the monarchy and Harry had handed her the matches. The police kept them back, but the cameras caught every single second of it, and every single second went live and traveled across the world at the speed of the internet. Inside the venues, it was somehow even worse than the protesters outside. At least the protesters felt something. Inside, people saw Harry and Meghan walk in and simply stood where they were. Most of the people there did not move toward them. People glanced over, looked them up and down, and then turned back to their conversations like nothing had happened. Like Harry and Meghan were furniture. Charles watched every second of it. And here is the thing you have to understand about why this destroyed the king. A humiliated Harry is not a quiet Harry. Charles knew that better than anyone alive. Every time Harry's world shrank, every time a deal collapsed or a headline turned savage, Harry opened his mouth. He had already done it with the Oprah interview. He had already done it with his book. He had already done it in court. Charles sat in that study and watched the Australian tour crumble in real time, and all he could think was that somewhere on the other side of the world, his son was getting angrier and more desperate by the hour, and desperate men say things that cannot be unsaid. Desperate men don't mind saying ugly things about their families. Charles had watched that happen once, but not now, not anymore. Charles walked straight down the corridor with his hands tight at his sides and his footsteps hitting the floor like he was driving nails into it. 2 hours later, something else happened. Prince William arrived. He did not take the usual route through the main entrance. He came in through the side, moving fast, his face stripped of every expression except urgency. Staff who saw him described his jaw as set hard, his eyes fixed forward, the look of a man who had already been told something over the phone and was now here to confirm it in person. He went straight to his father. The door closed behind them both, and inside that room, Charles told his son exactly what he had decided. He told William that Harry was gone. The Australian tour had not just embarrassed Harry, it had embarrassed the entire institution by association. Every thin crowd and mocking headline and screaming protester had reminded the world that the royal family was fractured and bleeding, and that the fracture had a name, and that name was Harry. Charles told William that he could not build the future of the monarchy on the hope that Harry would one day come back and behave. That era was finished. William needed someone beside him, someone loyal, someone clean, someone who had never once picked up a phone and sold the family's pain to the highest bidder. Charles told William it was time to bring James in. Now think about what that meant for a second. James, Edward and Sophie's son, the quiet teenager most people had completely forgotten existed. Charles was not just filling a gap in the royal calendar, he was making a structural decision about the future of the monarchy. He was taking the space that Harry had occupied beside William and officially, permanently, giving it to someone else. He was building a wall where the wound used to be, and he was doing it with a document, a formal royal elevation, a title that would be announced to the world and could never be quietly taken back. William sat across from his father and listened, and whatever he felt in that moment, he kept it completely locked behind his eyes, because William always does. What Harry did next. Harry found out about the king's plan. Someone in or near the palace machinery had let enough slip that Harry had already begun to understand what was coming, and that understanding had been sitting inside his chest for days, like a piece of broken glass. When the confirmation came, it was like someone pushed the glass all the way through, and Harry did something no one expected. He picked up his phone and called William. His face was not the face people see in photographs. The lines between his eyebrows were carved so deep they looked painful. His mouth was pulled tight at the corners. His eyes were moving but not seeing anything in front of him. He was somewhere else entirely. He was back in every moment he had believed that he and William were still brothers in the way that actually mattered. Every time he had told himself that whatever happened publicly between them, the bond underneath it was still real. William's phone rang. And rang, and rang. Nobody picked up. Harry pulled the phone from his ear and stared at the screen. Then he called again. His thumb pressed the name on the screen with the kind of pressure that has everything to do with what is building inside you when you have no other way to release it. It rang again. William did not pick up. We will never know what Harry was going to say. Nobody does. Maybe he did not know himself. Maybe it was not words he needed, but just to hear his brother's voice so he could remember that a brother still existed somewhere underneath all the protocol and strategy and palace machinery. Maybe it was something harder than that. Maybe he wanted to scream at William and ask why he would betray him. Why would he let a teenager replace his brother? A teenager! We will never know, because the line stayed dead. Afterward, Harry asked a member of staff for a glass of water. His voice was flat when he said it, completely flat. The staff member brought it quickly, and Harry took it without looking up. Then he started walking, and the way he walked made the staff member stop and watch, because Harry was not walking the way a person walks. He was moving like a man carrying something so heavy that each step required a separate decision. His shoulders were pulled forward, his feet barely lifted off the floor. He stopped in front of a door that most of the staff knew never to mention. He pushed it open and went inside, and the door clicked shut behind him. Then the lock turned. That room. Let me tell you about that room because you need to understand what it meant that Harry went there. Over the years, sources have claimed that Harry had quietly filled a private space with pieces of his mother, photographs of Diana, her belongings. That room was a place where he could sit with his mother's memory and not have to perform strength or dignity or resilience for anyone. He locked the door and did not come out for an hour. When it finally opened, insiders claim Harry looked like a man who had aged inside that room. His eyes were swollen and red. The skin on his face looked loose and gray. He stood in the doorway like a man who had gone somewhere very dark and managed to find his way back out, but was not entirely sure yet what he had come back to. And here is what nobody was saying out loud at that moment, but everyone was thinking. James was being handed the title of Prince, formally, officially, permanently, the same title that had been stripped from Harry. And here is why that contrast cuts so deep. When Harry lost his HRH designation in 2021, the palace framed it as automatic, procedural, the natural consequence of stepping back from royal duties. Nothing personal, just how the rules work. But then Charles took that same system and used it to hand a prince title deliberately and personally to James, which means it was never just procedural. It was always a choice, and Charles had just made a different choice for a different son and left Harry standing outside it with nothing. Harry was stripped, James was crowned. And the difference between those two outcomes was not duty or bloodline or legal technicality. The difference was loyalty. Charles was sending a message written in royal protocol, and it said this: "You chose to leave, he chose to stay, and the crown remembers everything." Charles knows that the British monarchy runs on showing up. State dinners, military ceremonies, hospital openings, Commonwealth engagements. Hundreds of events, every single year, every single one requiring a senior royal to walk through the door and carry the weight of the crown on their name alone. Charles knew William needed someone respected beside him, and right now, James was the smoothest choice. James was not chosen because he was extraordinary. He was chosen because he had done nothing wrong. In a royal family where almost every living member had at some point caused a crisis that landed on the front page, doing nothing wrong had become the single most valuable qualification a person could have. James is educated. He is quiet. James has never opened his mouth to a journalist, never embarrassed anyone, never made Charles flinch at a headline. He is clean in a way the monarchy is desperate for, and Charles is betting the entire structural future of the slimmed-down monarchy on this teenager's ability to stay that way. And here is exactly what James was being brought in to clean up. For years, Harry had been peeling the monarchy's reputation back layer by layer. He had accused his own family of racism in front of a global audience. He had cracked open private conversations and sold them to the world. He had taken the institution's most painful and personal moments and turned them into products. The monarchy was still bleeding from the damage. James was the direct answer to every single thing Harry had become. Charles was not just replacing a person. He was replacing the destruction with someone who had caused none of it. Asides that, Charles knows William needs someone to lean on, now more than ever. William has not just been stretched thin, he has been completely broken open by the recent troubles of the royal family. When Charles was diagnosed with cancer in February 2024, William stopped being the heir in waiting and became the acting face of the entire monarchy almost overnight. He was covering his father's gaps, managing Catherine's illness and recovery, and carrying his own crushing schedule simultaneously. 3 unbearable weights on one man's shoulders with nobody beside him. Staff close to William described him during that period as a man running on pure will and nothing else. He was beyond exhausted. He was disappearing under the weight of it. The only person Charles could trust right now to stand beside William and not ask for anything in return is James. Everyone is now betting everything on him. Only time will tell the outcome of this decision.